Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is Karen Todd from our YouTube channel, Karen Test Stuff, and also a software engineer. And she's an expert about testing and especially software testing, of course, which is a topic that's very near to my heart. I've been doing that for a while, teaching people about test driven, etc. So it's very, very interesting for me. So thank you, Karen, for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself, please?
Absolutely. So a little bit about me is I created the Karen Test Stuff YouTube channel around a question: who advocates for the software testers when we kind of advocate for everything? I'm also cat mom to Liliana of the Dark Realms, who I believe is about to make an appearance or will shortly. Um, And then I like to describe myself as a chooser of joy because even in tough situations, there's still an opportunity for me to learn and better my future from it. And I take a little bit of comfort, if not joy, in that.
Oh yeah, that's a very good stance. I think there's a very much famous podcast author named Jocko Willink who says when something goes wrong, you just say good and see what's the good in the situation. And it's really a very good stance. Well, when you're testing software, very often things don't go the right way, at least the first time. So uh, I'm
Sure.
very cu-
And
I'm very curious what your approach is about testing in general.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of kind of choosing joy, I do this every day in my testing because I have been diagnosed with multiple mental conditions from ADHD to anxiety to depression. So when I actually have lived with all of these things for so long, I take pieces of them, pieces of skills that I've learned from living with them, and apply them to my testing to make my testing better. So I've got a whole talk about this called ADHD in Me, how neurodivergence serves my testing. And I've given it a few times this year, and every time is absolutely magical and unique.
Cool. Well, so I think we could start from there. What are the main points of your talk? Like, what's your approach looking like in applying this neurodivergence to software testing?
Yeah, so some things that I've learned with the help of other people, like therapists, medical practitioners, friends, community members, is that nobody's experience is going to be exactly the same. So, the three things that I share are ways that these conditions have served me, but it's important to remember that not everyone is going to like it's not going to be easy for everyone, and it's going to take practice, and everybody's on a different space in their mental health journey. But what I present is that ADHD fuels a lot of creativity in my test scenarios, helps me find edge cases and things like that. Anxiety really helps me empathize with the user experience because when someone, especially in accessibility realms, can't access something that we take for granted, it upsets me because I have an injustice complex. I want that person to have that resource. And then depression even teaches me how to manage my energy cycles when I have limited resources, help me apply resources more efficiently through practice.
Yeah, let's start from the latter. Some people think there is such thing as too much testing. And I sort of agree. Like sometimes you can get caught up into that loop where I'll write five more unit tests and
Mm,
maybe this will fix it. Well, that's not the right thing to do. So I'm very curious about how you manage energy around testing. Like what's your approach?
sure. Well, oftentimes I run into the opposite problem where there's not enough time for testing, or there's never enough time to do all the testing that I want to do. So, as I give an example in my talk, imagine you had 14 tickets to test the night before the sprint ends, and there's no way this is going out, but you have to test what you can test. And so I tell the audience that I usually use risk assessment to figure out what the most important priorities are. And then I add to that the dimension of a mental health term called spoons, where
Oh,
spoons is a common term used in the mental health community to kind of quantify our energy or our ability to complete tasks. So I go into detail about what that is and give examples, but then at the end, circle back and say, okay, now I rank those tickets with the risk assessment, use my available spoons, my resources that I can actually use to complete these. And then the rest of it, unfortunately, this isn't the same for everyone, but unfortunately, the rest of it will be there in the morning. But it helps
Yeah.
me communicate my ability to complete things better.
I really like, yeah, the I really like this. That probably even applies to estimating projects in general, not just testing. Like, as you know, there are two things that are impossible in software: there's estimates and precise counting, which is very. But estimates in particular are the not the bane, but they're never correct. And I've only known a very few teams who can get estimates down to a T. Like, it's going to take us 5 days, and then it's actually 5 days. Feels like your approach is very helpful in that regard, because first of all, an estimate is a case of not trying to make people happy about it, but instead saying what you're actually going to be really able to do.
Yes, absolutely. That's the important part where you need to be clear about what you can actually accomplish so that you can ask for help and actually get the help where you need it, um, if it's available. But using those communication tactics is the most important part of estimation. I don't think the number really matters
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, actually, someone in the last time I gave this talk, someone in the audience had a really great point that we all use the same words to describe things, even though what we're experiencing internally may be completely different from the other person using the same term, which can be the same for estimations. A 3 might not be a 3 to one person and be a 3 to another person, but that involves way different effort levels for each of
Oh,
them.
yes. Plus the perception. A three on a scale of 1 to 5, to some people is a big task, and to some other people is not a big task. It's really where your anchoring lies and what your experience is. And yeah, communication is probably the most important part. I totally agree. I've seen so many teams, but I was a consultant for 15 years before joining SingleWire. And I've seen so many teams, especially at customers we were helping, that will have a list of 100 things to do this week, and they will put them all on the board. That will
Ah,
never happen, guys, to begin with. But
yeah.
that made their manager happy, right? At least at the start. So that buys you a week. This probably feeds into the anxiety and social relationship component of developer life, which we all share a degree of, sort of. I don't want to say neurodivergence, because you need to be diagnosed for that, but at least we all share a degree of different attention to detail than normal people want to say, than people outside of our world. So you do it because your manager said it should be done, but then you really know from the get-go it won't happen. So in fact, I think that would be a good question, since you're an expert. How do you manage pressure from management? So that go back to your example of testing. You have so many tests to write, and you can only do so many. Manager says, no, we need them all. What will be the right way for a developer to make sure that it is communicated the right way, in your opinion?
Yes, I would do the legwork, take the extra time to go through and do what I was talking about as far as assessing the risk, figuring out the most important priorities, and then figuring out what you are capable of finishing. And then ask for help with the tasks that you can't. You have to be specific when you ask for help, especially when it comes to your job, especially if you're not well protected. You need to make sure that you document everything, to be sure that it's not going to turn into a game of, well, you didn't finish what you said you were going to do, that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. So if you have good management that actually can step in and has the resources to help you, then they're better equipped to fulfill the things that you need, that you're asking for, if you're specific. So communication, it all boils back down to that every time. Every one of my answers is going to be, well, start a conversation.
I totally agree. If you just say, yeah, okay, and just go back to your desk and keep clicking away, that's not going to benefit anyone because at the end of the week, those things are not going to be done, and you're going to spend a miserable week, by the way, because
Or you can
you're
or
staring
you
at the
can get it
calendar.
done. Yeah, you can get it done, but it may not be done well.
Which is even worse, probably. Like it's testing and QA go hand in hand, so that's probably that's probably a good separate topic. Like why how testing helps quality. I think it's pretty clear how, but some people just
Mm.
don't get it. Yeah. Cool. So let's go down this manager. We have this bad manager route. Let's go down this way. Like you probably want a different job, but in case you like the place you're at, you just have to lead up the change. It's another thing we need to learn how to do. As deeply technical people, sometimes you have to take the responsibility to try and lead up the change. So explain why things are that way, which your strategy sounds perfectly well. So your manager is the opposite. They don't want you to test because it takes time away. How do you explain it? That's the wrong way to go about it.
They don't want me to can you repeat the question? Sorry, I
They
didn't
so
quite
if you have
understand.
many managers end up saying testing is actually a waste of time. Like you should things do things right
Oh,
and don't test at all because it takes time to test. And that's actually a common
see.
objection, especially in Europe. I have to say, I don't know why. Probably we're less used to very highly technical companies. So around here, very often I
Okay.
hear people saying they don't let us write tests. It takes too long. So how do you explain that to management? Why do I need tests?
Um, Absolutely. I would come back and say, okay, you may not need someone in a testing role, but you do need to be doing testing throughout the entire cycle. So anyone, uh, I'm in the camp that anyone with curiosity can be a tester. And the fact that we all use, or most of us use technology on a daily basis, even if we're not in tech, as human beings, we use all this stuff and we're users. So we're testers because we're using these software products every day. Um, so to those managers, I would say that there needs to be a way to incorporate a way for everybody to work together and kind of almost if they have the opportunity to work in cross-disciplined teams, then especially getting the outside testing perspective of like a business facing person or someone who's a user contact, that's always really, really valuable. Because in my current company, we would do product forums where I would get to see in a webinar like setting, um, some of the users actually use our product and the workarounds that they have, the things that they do to save a single click are hilarious and really give me great test ideas to go back and be like, listen, our users are really doing this. We need to fix this.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, really. It's yeah, just you're right. So I what I really like about your approach, and it's something I need to actually go look into because it's something I want to do at SignalWire is getting people from the non-technical parts of the company to be part of testing. First of all, that brings in help. That's the simplest
Yes.
thing. Like now, there's more people doing it. So you have if you're a developer and you're struggling with finishing a task or delivering in time, you can ask for help for non-technical people. Also, I think the viewpoint is really important. Testing your own software is almost useless. I feel like it. Like maybe it's me. Every time I write
No.
something, it looks great. Yeah, that's actually a good question. Do you think that testing your software is almost useless? I think so.
Yes, because you have so much bias over your created product. I mean, I've got bias against my, artwork that I create. I've got bias against all sorts of things where I usually am very, very super critical of my own creations, but still I don't feel like I would be critical enough because I know how I want something to work and I know the steps that I should follow to do that, but how I'm going to get there is very different from the way someone else is going to get there because there's 1,000 different ways to code products, especially complicated products. So you can't assume that your way is everyone's way. Once again, circling back to that.
Yeah. I feel like that leads into the common description. Like many developers, you've certainly heard this. This was working perfectly as soon as the manager, product representative, whatever touched it, it broke. That's not luck. That's not bad luck. That's you have tested a certain way, and this person has no knowledge of the system, and they just come and do things slightly different, and that's what breaks. It's not really. It's not it's not just luck. I mean, it can be, you can describe it to luck if you're in a meeting and it's Friday evening and you need to go home. But other than that,
Yeah.
it's generally it's because people click different buttons. I also think that there's almost a subconscious thing going on where if it's your software, you know what works. So you keep clicking on the things that work and you never realize you could do this other way. And then you open the profile before you filled in the email address for the user, and that
Mm.
breaks it. But you never know because you've never tried it. You always fill in the email and then went to the profile page.
Yep,
And
confirmation bias. You're only looking for what supports
yeah,
your journey.
you know that it's actually it happens very often. Well, going into more software oriented things, what's your favorite testing strategy? You know, there's unit test. You obviously know, but the audience knows we have unit testing and we have end to end testing and we have what's called some people call functional testing, black box testing. Those random things where you introduce bugs, the chaos monkey type of testing, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So if you are a software developer and you have to introduce a good testing strategy in your development approach, what do you think is the best approach?
That's going to vary based on project. My
Mhm.
favorite approach, the stuff that I really get a lot of joy out of and fulfillment out of, is exploratory testing with test charters and personas.
Hmm.
um, because my anxious brain thinks of all of these crazy scenarios every day for what might happen and how can I prepare for this. It's part of what it's part of what kind of fuels these creative test scenarios that I get. Because, while I'm thinking about these situations, maybe I'm having an imagined like disagreement with someone so that I could prepare for this. It's long story. My brain is very active, but I'll use sometimes those invented adversaries in my personas, especially when I'm doing something with like an upset customer or a bad actor. I'll create a persona as one of those people and then explore our system using my test charter as that person, not as myself. So if I was really angry at this company and I wanted to make them pay, what would I do to their website?
Wow, that's really that's a really a very nice that's really a very nice way to go about it. It's a very interesting approach. I never thought about it, and I think it's worth pointing out. Like
It's really
you're
fun
not
for me.
supposed you're not supposed to only test as the good guy.
Mm.
In fact, you probably don't want to because then you fall into what was said earlier. You know that button works, so you're going to always click the button that works. you
Exactly.
you need to behave like someone who knows there's another button that doesn't. It's really interesting. Well, from a going down the behavior driven development route,
Mm.
uh, do you think there's a lot of space for automated tools, or people should test manually, or a mixture helps? There's a lot of companies that are going down the only automated route. Like you have this end to end things that just repeat. I think there has to be a mixture, but I'm curious about your opinion. Like, is it better to have automated tests, in person tests, or both?
Well, tools are called tools for a reason, right? We
Mhm.
use them. They don't replace us. Somebody has to be around to use the tool. Otherwise, it just sits there.
At least
Um,
for the moment, and we'll see what OpenAI is up to in the next few months. But for now, yes.
Sure, sure. But even with AI, same thing. It's a tool, right?
Yeah.
I really truly don't believe that any of these are going to replace testing in general. Because you have to have that element of human curiosity. You have to have that spark of, ooh, what about this? Because somebody has to program those automated tools or that AI. They have to feed that data into these systems in order to use the tool correctly in most cases. And those things are only going to check for those things that it knows. It's never going to go outside to the unknown.
Hmm,
That takes
yeah,
human curiosity.
very good point. You've wrote the test yourself, so it's going to do whatever you told it to do, and it's going to do that forever until until you change it.
So
That's a
we can
very
use it to make it easier on ourselves so that we don't have to run those tests forever. But, they have their places and their uses, but I don't think that any of them is a silver bullet.
Yeah, you're probably right. You need a little bit of everything. I think that's true almost everywhere. Like even if you do agile development, some people buy a book and decide that's going to be their Bible. But in reality, agile has a million facets, and you just need to pick and choose until you get the right amount of agile for your company, which is less than you originally thought, in my opinion. But that's a
Or
different.
even for your team at that matter. I'm in a large company now where we have many teams, and no one team should really be the same agile as another team's agile.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just different. Even some people really like having points. Some other people really dislike having points on stories and just go with sizes, which to me is weird. It's the same thing, but somehow it's not. It is. It's a very interesting thing. Well, your other so aside from testing, you're an accessibility expert. And well, this actually I have a question for you. Uh, we always think about accessibility in the sense of being accessible to people who usually have visual impairments, hearing impairments in some case, depending on what the media is, or mobility impairments, so kind of not no use of hands, no use of legs, whatever. But I don't think there is enough attention to accessibility for people who have ADHD and similar issues going on. So, what do you think are a few points about that? Like, how can people make their media and software and tools more accessible? What do you find that works for you in software? I think that's a very good point. Nobody ever mentions that,
Absolutely. I don't know that I would call myself a blanket accessibility expert, but I would say that I'm an expert in my own accessibility
which is
issues.
perfect.
Um, so there are a number of different things that you can do to be more inclusive in your software development for people with ADHD. For instance, when it comes to the designing of the websites, like there are specific fonts.
Hmm.
The specific title of the font escapes me for now, but it is specifically created for people with ADHD because we can have trouble reading. I personally have issues with micro eye movements where my eye will skip around the page sometimes for a fraction of a second, but it throws me off and I have to find my place again. But this font makes it easier to distinguish words for people with ADHD who have that certain type of brain processing. So it's easy to find our place again. That's a suggestion that I would make in your designs. Use accessible fonts, and then have the option to pause or turn off something moving on the screen. If there's a
Hmm.
GIF, give me the ability to pause it, please. I want to see that thing 3 times max, and then I want it to stop.
Or those
Um,
carousel type elements with
yes,
images where they keep
yes.
going and going and going. That even annoys me, to be fair. You're really right. You should be able to just see it once. Like, okay, that's your offering, done.
Especially when they're very detailed, it actually triggers a little bit of anxiety for me because I can't take in all of the details before it triggers to move to the next screen on the carousel.
I mean, you're totally right. Sometimes there's like a paragraph of text of them. So you're racing to the bottom just to no, it's gone. And now I don't know
Yes.
if
There's a
you're
wonderful talk that was done at the Kansas City Developer Conference last year by Denny Jaclerc, a friend of mine. And he was talking about how we elicit high and low emotions with the choices that we make in our software development. It's absolutely incredible. And I highly recommend anyone who gets the chance to see that to look at it.
nice. Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll check it out for sure. So in general, I think there's a fund called Open Sans, and there's also another called Focus Sans. That's really interesting. Plus, you
Mhm.
made me think of something. When I'm reading, I tend to skip lines. I do it a lot. I read one line every two or three, and especially when I'm going very fast. So maybe I should try one font like that. It's really an interesting proposition. I feel like, again, many people in our space do things differently just because we're forced to do it by the business we're in, and it's really good. So I'm going to try this one of those fonts on my Kindle just to see what happens.
Awesome. I do that too on my tablet for reading because it gives me the option to choose one of those fonts.
Nice. Yeah. There are a lot of little things we could do to improve. Again, a lot of attention is rightfully given to, accessibility for people with vision impairment. So you have the ARIA descriptions and all of the other for screen readers. Conversely, you do subtitles and captioning and whatnot for deaf people. And there's a lot. Maybe ADHD and other things are a little bit more subtle, but what you said about the carousel thing really resonates. Like, you're right. It's annoying, and and when there's information on it, it's actually making me anxious. Like, oh, if this disappears, I don't know how to bring it back. So what I will add is, aside from being able to pause it, make the controls to go back or cycle to the top, whatever, very clear. So
Mm.
if I have missed something, I'm not stuck there with, oh no, I literally came to this website to know about that information, and now I don't know where to go. The only option I have is sitting here hoping sometime, some way it will appear again. Yeah, and maybe it even doesn't. So it is. You're definitely right. I don't know if there's this is a good question. So I know you work on writing task plans, right? So I like working with scenarios because I think people, especially in the open source community, we have a lot of people who have but really willing to help, but sometimes they don't have enough experience, so they go off one route or another. Things get sketchy, etc. So how do you design a task plan if you've never done it before?
If you've never done it before.
I have this small website where people can purchase tickets for local conferences. How do I make sure this gets tested properly?
Okay. The way my brain processes, I immediately go to a visual representation. I don't do well with big blocks of text and giant Word documents for test plans. So what I've been doing recently is I've been working with mind maps where I'll
Oh,
start
nice.
with the feature in the middle or the website in the middle and then plot out everything that I can get to from the homepage. And then pick one of those items and plot out everything that I can reach within that. And then kind of let
Hmm.
it spider out like that until I've got a product coverage outline in the form of a mind map. And then I can do a number of different things with that. I can color code items to show what's been tested and what our risk assessment might be, or what our progress is, or what we didn't touch for some reason. I have all these options within that mind map, and it's more accessible for like business facing people again, where they can just go, oh, look at all this green, we're good. Or wow, we really haven't touched many areas of the system yet.
Yeah, it feels like it's a great way to again engage your underlying concept of engaging known technical people. I feel like it's really, really important because otherwise you get siloed up into your little realm where everybody speaks in code, and we
Mhm.
all half of the words we say are acronyms, and it's just
Right.
because you don't even need the word, like you just know what it means. So did you finish that BDD stuff? Not everybody knows what that is. So I think a
Yep.
mind map is a great way because it has to not have too much technical on it, because otherwise it's not a mind map, it's something else, like those terrible UML diagrams we were forced to do back in
Oh,
university. No, I don't think anybody ever used those. I think that was kind of a joke they
right.
played on us, like like that UML
That's the
doesn't actually
point,
exist.
is for this to be usable by someone. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time doing silly things that no one's ever going to look at. And What's the point? I mean, yes, you have to have things for compliance purposes, but th- do what works for you and your team. If nobody's going to use it, don't waste your time on it.
Yeah, compliance is an interesting topic. I've been leading the sort of one of the certification efforts at Signalwire internally, and we made a point of doing everything that was required for compliance also have an impact on the company as it was supposed to. Because it's very easy to get compliance by just signing a piece of paper or just printing out 5 meeting notes that you've wrote 5 minutes before and just saying, hey, these are the last 5 minutes we have. And that doesn't work. So we actually applied it and it's really, really good. In a sense, that's testing too, right? That's testing a company.
And I've got a friend that works in secure sectors and has been able to successfully provide um, his mind maps to compliance officers, and they have been accepted. So it's not
Hmm.
like you have to have test cases to pass an assessment. So
That is really interesting. Yeah, I should have done that. We did a lot of mind mapping when it came to setting out at the start, and it's really, yeah, I should have done that. I need to get more acquainted with the tool of a mind map. It's easy enough that but yet people don't go to it. Well, it sounds like it's a great way to even accelerate development, not only testing. Like writing down what you're going to do in a simpler way than pages and pages or 20 GitHub tickets, 10 of which get ignored for 3 months. And then someone notices, hey, we skipped out on this thing. It's
yep, this is
very,
something that someone can glance at and get a full visual picture of what's been tested as long as they think in that kind of way. I know some people really like those Word documents, and that's okay too. It's just not for me.
now we have GPT. Just give it the mind map and tell,
Right.
write 10 pages of boring description of this very clear and concise mind map, please.
Oh
And
my
then you just have your
goodness.
document and you're good. You're done. You're good. it is. It has been indeed. Yeah, I think that there's another topic here we don't have time for, but maybe for another time, like how what AI can do in our field, especially for people who are specifically focused on testing. I think there's a lot there where you can get iterations out of. Like, tell me 10 ways this thing can fail.
Sure. Yeah, you can get test ideas, all sorts of different things from it. I personally haven't done a lot with it yet, but I've helped other people with suggestions on stuff to feed to it to help them solve their problems.
Yeah, funnily enough, some people tend to think that AI is not very good at creative work. Well, in reality, I feel like the best use right now, which frankly, I'm less worried than most people about AI and you are too, because we've been here for a long time. So it's for the moment, it's a good tool, nothing else, is actually getting ideas out of. The ideas might not be very good, but it's very good at generating a lot of them. So
It's
testing sounds like it's a good approach to testing.
a place to start. And that's what I need a lot of times because sometimes I'll get into these modes where I've got a long to do list and I get into these paralysis times. But if I can get something to just spark a little bit, just give me like one idea to go off of, and then I'm off to the races.
Yeah. Again, give me 10 ways this application might have issues. So, okay, so maybe if you don't fill in the form and press save, then it is your credit card fails when it's already in the system. So there's no way for to go to the user and tell them they couldn't charge them. There's a lot of good, and sometimes again, it goes back to the start. It's your software. You didn't think of all of it, or rather, you think you did, which is good. It's a very so. Any conferences you're going to be speaking at soon?
I'm applying at a bunch of really exciting conferences right now. I just came back from Agile Testing Days in Germany. And it's just an incredible experience full of amazing people, incredible speakers, workshops all week long. And uh, honestly, it was described a couple of times while I was there as more of a festival than a conference. And that is absolutely right. It was amazing. But I presented ADHD and Me there, and I'll be submitting some new ideas to a few conferences next year, including Agile Testing Days and the Kansas City Developer Conference. So
Nice. Well,
wish me luck.
honestly, I wasn't a fan for going to Agile Days, but I think next year I'm going to try and go because it's really I've heard it from many people that it's really good. In general, I like European conferences because there's a lot more going on around the event itself. Like if you've never been to FOSDEM in Brussels, which is the world's largest open source developer gathering. It's 2 days. It's completely free. People just show up, sleep in the university. There's rooms with 8 people sleeping in them. It's a bit. You can also go to a hotel, of course. It's a bit of
Hmm.
a large event, but it's really, really interesting. And there's a lot going on there that goes beyond just presenting my work on, in my case, I don't know, high throughput telephony, how I made my system take double the phone calls or whatever. There is a lot of, and I think Europe in that regard does it a little bit better.
Absolutely. And the inclusivity is what I've enjoyed the most about that particular conference, Agile Testing Days. They really do, they say come as you are, and they really do mean it. I never once felt uncomfortable or been put in a situation that was man, I don't think I had a single negative experience. My face hurt from smiling after the entire week, if that
Well,
tells you anything.
that is a great thing to take back from a conference for sure. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe next year come say hello at ClueCon in Chicago, where we try to be a very good environment too. So who knows? And let's
Yeah,
say
absolutely.
ClueCon is my favorite American conference, but there are not all of my other favorite conferences are all in Europe. Because you're right, there's just a difference. ClueCon is different again because we've been there for a long time, and it's become a gathering of friends at this point. So we're all in the same industry, but I think that's important. Cool. So, well, Karen, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure. We went through a lot of things. You gave me personally a lot of things to think about, and I think the audience too. And well, allowed to try the font and see what happens, and a few other things. And again, Karen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Karen Todd from the YouTube channel Karen Test Stuff. We'll put the link in the description. Joining us today. She's also a software engineer and an expert in testing. We went through a few ideas about testing, how HAD affects testing, and in general how neurodivergence can help you with your tasks, and how people who aren't diagnosed can get some very good content out of this too. So it was a great chat. Thank you. And for the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.